Now, moving on to other news, more than 1,000 participants have been enrolled in South Africa's COVID-19 efficacy trial. 1,017 participants in Gauteng have received one vaccine and 50 in the Western Cape. South African Medical Research Council Chief Executive Officer and President Professor Glenda Gray joined the randomised controlled trial and received her first dose at University of Cape Town's Lung Institute on Tuesday. She joins us now for more on this. A very good evening to you, Professor Gray, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Please take us through the procedure once again, and what is the science behind these vaccine trials?
We're trying to find a safe and an effective COVID vaccine. And the first thing you have to do is you have to engage in the phase 1, phase 2 study. And so the part of the study I was engaged in is to establish the safety and the immune responses to this vaccine and to see whether in the future this will be protective against COVID infection. So it's critical to enroll in these studies because what we do is establish local safety and immune response in the local populations. And so it was very nice to be involved in the study because usually I'm on the other end of the needle, and for the first time I've been a participant, and I'm committing to support COVID vaccine research by enrolling into trials and by participating to make sure we can find a vaccine that's effective in our country.
So what is the safety and ethical guidelines built into vaccine trials such as this?
So you go through an informed consent process where you get explained what the vaccine is going to be. You're also told that you could either get the vaccine or you can get the placebo. So I don't know. I'm blinded to what injection I got, whether it was the active ingredient or just the placebo. We follow up participants, and I get followed up, and they will compare my immune response to people who got the other treatment arm. And so in this way, we can compare the safety as compared to two study groups, as well as the immune response and efficacy. So you always have to enroll what we call a randomized double-blind control study, which means that you can evaluate the vaccine, the active vaccine, against the placebo. And participants in the trial don't know whether they get the vaccine or the placebo, and that's important so we can manage and monitor any of the safety or to try and decipher the immune response that we receive in the vaccine.
Are they expected to, show any kind of symptoms? And if so, in the process of the trial, how do you manage that? How does it help in the long route to us getting a cure for COVID-19?
So if you get the treatment arm, you will have the active vaccination, and your body will mount an immune response to the vaccination. And if you get exposed to COVID in the community or where you work, your body will react in a certain way. And so the vaccine then mounts an immune response, and hopefully the immune response that is mounted will help protect you against COVID infection. And so we don't know yet whether this vaccine will be effective or not, and we have to evaluate it before we'll be able to know whether this is indeed an effective vaccine.
Now, I know this is obviously what South Africa is doing in its own research. Are you learning from other studies? China, Russia, they've said that they're quite ahead in their vaccine trials or as candidate trials.
There are strict processes that you do when you do trials in humans. And first of all, you have to have the regulatory authority in your country approve your trial, as well as the ethical review boards within your university or your institution. And you have to accumulate the safety data first. You have to know that the dose is correct, and you have to know what your immune response is. And if all of these all add up, then you then move into an efficacy trial. We are trying to accelerate the vaccine development from 10 years normally into 10 months. And so there will be a rapid enrollment into all of these trials. We will need to see the data from Russia and China. Before you can license a study in a country, the regulatory authorities have to look at the data and have to make a call about whether the data does indeed show efficacy. We also have to evaluate the vaccine producers to make sure that they're making the vaccine in a safe way.
So, Professor, let's just look at the situational analysis of the virus itself. Mr. Mamabolo, who is the acting health MEC in Johannesburg is saying that they're deeply concerned about what the statistical forecasting and modelling has been, saying that the period between August and September has always been something that they were warned of. Do you share the sentiment that even though figures are going down, there's still a reason for deep concern?
There'll always be a reason to be concerned until we can eradicate the vaccine in our country. And so although we're seeing signs of the epidemic slowing down and death rates slowing down, and that looks like the infection rates are going down, and we see that both in our death rates and in the hospital admissions. But until we don't have any transmission in this country, this virus will always be a problem. We see resurgence and second waves in other countries, and so it's no time to be complacent. So even though we may have seen the epidemic slowing in most of the provinces, doesn't mean that we can stop wearing masks, stop physically distancing each other, and not washing our hands. So we have to be vigilant, or otherwise we may see a second surge or a resurgence of infections at a community level.
And I want to talk about that resurgence. The Eastern Cape, it's fairly confident about where it is, and so is the Western Cape. But we've seen a second wave in the US and in Europe. Is our public health system geared up for this?
So we have to be prepared for a second wave. And the only way we can try and mitigate the second wave is to continue to implement what we call the non-pharmaceutical interventions. So we will need to continue to wear masks, avoid congested areas, wash our hands, and make sure we're far away from each other. And until we have a vaccine that can help us stop the onward transmission of the coronavirus. And so there's no time to be complacent. And we've seen that in the US, we've seen that in Japan now, and we've seen it in Australia. And so until we have something that's a biomedical intervention, we will have to employ the only tools we have. And those are, again, the non-pharmaceutical interventions.
And I want to ask you a question about this. Is something hopefully that will get some response from the World Health Organization on. But I saw that reports out of New Zealand are saying that there is a possible case as a result of freight, export and freight. Now, what does this tell us about not only COVID-19 in refrigerated circumstances, but should we be concerned about food packaging? Should we be a little bit more vigilant?
I think you always have to be vigilant, and we all have to always employ interventions that will minimize us acquiring COVID from surfaces. And so again, we need to understand a bit more about the magnitude of this kind of transmission, and also know what kind of transmission affects us the most. And we do know that crowded conditions, congested areas, poor ventilation are fuels for transmission. And there may be other ways of getting COVID, like from surfaces and from touching your face and your hands. And so we have to make sure that all of these things we mitigate. But most important is to keep physical distance, make sure you're always in a ventilated place, and make sure you're wearing a mask. Those are the most important things we can do as citizens of this country.
All right, thank you so much. South African Medical Research Council Chief Executive Officer and President, Professor Glenda